We're going to cover the object-oriented programming OOP example using a couple of products. But before I go into that, I thought it would be helpful to demonstrate what it's like to go from simple, writing a simple code that does what we want it to do, to then using procedural programming, which is functions, and then moving to OOP. So we're going to do the same thing, but in 3 different ways. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write some code and then explain it using the simplest way that I can think of to write it. I wrote 3 variables, so product 1, Milwaukee drill gun, the price of $129.99, and the discount percent at 5%. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is write, so we have our variables declared and initialized, and the next thing we're going to want to do is write our formulas for calculating the actual discounted price and then printing it. So let me do that. And then here on lines 5 and 6 we have our formula. So discount amount is going to equal the price times the discount percent given above, and then take that and divide it by 100 so that we know what the discount amount is. And then we needed the price. So then the price is simply equal to the price minus the discounted amount calculated in line 5. And we have it. The very next thing to do is just to print it out. On line 8, we print out the product 1. So we want the name. And then we're going to print out this little string which says discounted price. And we're going to format to 2 decimal places, and it's a float. And so that's the price right here, discounted price. And we're going to just format it and then output that. So once we do that, let's take a look and see what that looks like. Right here, and we want to unsimple. Okay, so that actually output down here on the console, and you can see at the bottom here it says Milwaukee drill gun discount price $123.49. Let me get rid of the procedural thing. And so this is the output. So it did the calculations and output what we wanted. Okay, so this is the simplest way that we can do the problem. And this is the way that we started, whether we were learning how to do Python, declaring our variables, initializing them, doing some type of calculation, and then outputting the results. So input, process, output. Very, very simple as we can possibly do it. Okay, so that's simple. Now the problem though is, what if we wanted to do multiple items? Well, you can't really do multiple items in this manner unless you would have to keep editing this code, and that's simply not ideal. So then the next thing we covered was procedural programming. So I have an empty procedural programming code, and we're going to do the same thing, except for this time we'll be doing it in functions. Remember that we have our usual template. So here we're saying we're going to have a function called main. We're defining it as main. And on line 7 and 8, we have our usual little entry point into the code, which is saying if the name is equal to main, then go to the main method. And this is in case we have multiple methods, and the compiler will always know where the entry point to the code is. That's really what this means. So here we have our variables, just as before. This time, though, however, we're going to want to create some functions to pass these variables into, and that way we can do multiple values. Okay, so now this code is written in procedural format. It's all written in functions. Again, we have our template for entry code into the main method, which is up here on line 1. We have our variables initialized, declared and initialized, and then we are calling some functions. So here we're going to say DA is equal to the discount amount, and we're going to pass it the price and the discount percent. Then beneath it we're going to have discount price, and it's going to be equal to the discount price, which is this method down here. It's not a method, it's a function. Passing it price and the discount amount that was calculated on line 6. That's the discount price. Next we're going to print stuff out. So print the product 1 that we have here with the discounted price formatted, and we're passing the discounted price right here from line 7 to line 9. And of course we have our two methods. One that's the discount amount, taking in price and discount percent as parameters, and then calculating the discount amount using this formula, and then returning finally the discount amount. On line 18, the same thing except for price. This time we're taking discount price. We're going to take the price given above, and the discount amount calculated here, and we're going to return the discounted price. And so all that happens right up here on line 6 and 7. So these two right here are the two functions being called with the parameters being passed, and then finally the final output being output on line 9. So this is an example of procedural programming using functions, and you can see that this is the way that it should work and it should look. Now, again, this is the way that we've been doing things. It's nicer because we can reuse our functions, but it's not quite ideal. So what's ideal? Ideal is to write these as objects, because now if we write them as objects, then as our code becomes more robust, it is also more modular, easier to debug, and also easier to pass multiple multiple instances. And so that's what it's all about when we do the object-oriented programming. Is multiple instances, easy to debug, and very modular, reusable. Okay, so this was procedural programming. So we had our simple, we had our procedural. We didn't actually run this, so let's go ahead and run that. And that one ran over here on the console here on the right, and so here it is, and we get the same thing as down here, except for it's done in functional. So our simple and our procedural. Okay, so having done that, the next thing we want to do, I'm going to close these out, is we're going to have two new scripts. One of them is called the object script, and this is the first thing we need to write. We need to write the objects, and so I'm going to write some of those and then explain. The first thing we need to create is the class. So we're going to, inside of the object script, we write the class, and ours is going to be called product. And then we need to write our constructor. And this is how we write the constructor, is the double underscore init double underscore, and then it's going to have the self. And here's the very first parameter. So self, and then name, price, and discounted price. So these are the parameters that we're expecting. So just like in the functional procedural that we did. So in the procedural programming, if this was a function, we still passed it these parameters, but this time we have this self in here. And self is really important because we need that in order to set our properties. So the properties of the class product are .name, .price, and .discount%. But you could make as many of these as you want, and you could make them different names too. These are not reserved keywords. Self is, and these prefixes are, but the names and the properties aren't. We're making our own class. Okay. So now that we've done this, we have our constructor, and it's going to set whatever we pass to the actual the class properties, which is what this is called. Now it's time to make the actual class methods, which are similar to functions, but they're called methods because they're inside of the class. They're part of the class objects. Okay, so one more. You'll notice that this looks very similar to the functions that we wrote. Again, they're not functions; these are methods. And you can tell because look at the parameters. We're only taking in self, and so every object. Remember, every class method, every class object has access to the constructor. So here we're saying get discount amount, and it's going to be self. So we're going to have access to all the properties of the constructor, and we're going to take discount amount self.price, which is set right here on line 5, times self discount %, which is set here on line 6, divided by 100, and return the discount amount. Now, for the get discount price, there's some other things going on here. Here, one of these is a property. So here, the discount price is the property of the constructor. But here we have what's called a class method, and that class method is the get discount amount. You can see it right here. It's a little bit different syntax. We have the open and close parentheses because we're calling it from line 8. And since line 8 already has this information, we can just say, hey, let's take the price and subtract whatever the method above right here calculated, and we have our discount price. Now, another thing you're going to notice that I did differently in this method was I went ahead and did the formatting in the method. So here we're saying, and I prefixed it with str underscore, just so that when I look at this, I know that this is a string. Remember, we want to be as good as we can be at self-documenting our code. So we self-documented the class methods. You'll notice I said get, so that we know that these are returning exactly what we're saying they're going to return. Okay, and here it's returning the string discount price. All right, so that concludes the object. The object is now done, and the next thing we need to do is we need to create what's going to access these objects, and that's going to be our product script, which is right here, the product script. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to tell the product script that it's going to be accessing the previous thing, the previous script that we just wrote called objects. So objects, I could spell, that'd be good. And it's going to be objects. From objects, we're going to import. What are we going to import? We're going to import the class that we just wrote, product, and we're going to make it a little bit simpler. We're just going to call it as P, so that way we don't have to keep typing the product. So from objects, which is objects here, import product. What's product? Product is this class, so that way we'll have access to all these class methods. And once we've done that, then we have access to all of that, and now we can actually start writing our code. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we usually do, and do the whole def main thing. So let's do that, and I always do the return. Another thing I'm going to do is, down below, I almost always do the if. Yep, right here, that thing, and then of course main, and there we go. Okay, and then here I'll always test with a print, and that's just to make sure that this is set up and it's accessing everything the way it needs to, because this gets harder to debug as we're writing code. So we want to do any debugging right now, so we don't have to worry about that. And you can see right here at output test, so I know everything is working up to this point. Now it's not a validation of the logic, it's not saying the logic is working necessarily, but at least our code is working. It's accessing the objects, it's importing the product, and now we're actually ready to do some work. So I'm going to write a little bit of code and then explain. Okay, on lines 4 and 5, you'll see product 1 and product 2. That's just what I named them. And you can see that they're assigned to P, which was defined up above, product. So what you have here on lines 4 and 5 are two instances of the product class, and we're passing it the parameters that it requires to make its individual constructors. The Milwaukee drill gun, the price and the discount, the Milwaukee impact gun, price and the discount, and those are going to have two separate instances with two separate constructors. Okay, so now we're ready to call some information. I'm going to use on line 7 to print for a space, and then 8 I'm just going to give a little title. On line 10, which we don't really need to do this part, let's do that. I'm going to say, let's put name. We're going to format it as product1.name. Now name is simply calling this right here, this property. Remember, we're using the dot notation of product1. And what's product1? It's the Milwaukee drill gun is the name. It's passed as that parameter. And we can see that because when we go look back at object, you can see name is right here. It's the first parameter. Name is assigned to the property self.name. So when I can get any of these properties by just simply asking for them. And so what do? I'm going to say, give me product1.name, and it's going to return that. Here, product1.price is going to return the price. And this time over here, I want the product discount %, which is going to be what was returned in the object. Oh, well, actually, it's this right here. It's still a property. Now, on right here on line 12, I am calling this function. I want product1 get discount amount. Okay, so if I go back to the objects and look, well, what is that? That's this. That's line 8 right here. The get discount amount. It's calculating all that, and it's returning the discount amount. So I can go back to here, and that's going to be returned on line 11. And then the line 12 is the same thing, except for it's the discount %, the discount amount on line 12, and then on line 13, the get discount price, what we're actually after. And then we're done. Let's return. And that's it. So now this is object-oriented programming. We're using objects, we're importing them, and we're passing information. We're setting our information, our values right here in our data for the classes, for the class properties, and then we're retrieving it or manipulating it. Okay, so now let's run this and see what it looks like. Okay, so here on the right, and you can see product data, just like we wanted. Milwaukee drill gun, because that was the name, and then the price, and the discount %, discount amount, and then the discount price, the actual price, $123.49. And so all of this worked nicely. Now let's figure out what everything is going to be for product 2. So for that, very, very simply, all we need to do is copy and paste. change everything to a 2 for the second product. Probably put another space in here is what I'm thinking. And that should be good. Looks good. All right, let's run this. And here you have the two products, the Milwaukee drill gun and the Milwaukee impact gun. You'll notice these are zeros, but that's because we didn't give ourselves a discount here. The discount is 0, it's $155.99. Now we could change this. We could say, well, we're going to give ourselves a discount of, let's say, 3.7%. Let's run that and find out what happens. And here you have it. Okay, so that's really it. It's really not that complicated. Like I said, you start with objects, you create your product, you create your constructor, and then from there, make sure you pass self, because self is going to contain all the properties of the class, and then we can use it to create our different class methods. And then we can access those from a script, like this one here. Well, that's it. Happy coding.